Hey there, just quickly, this video is actually part of a much larger video that I uploaded a good couple of months ago by now. Be sure to check that out if you want to watch all of it at once, but I thought I'd make little versions because I know 4 hours can be quite daunting for some people. Even so, here's the 7th Doctor's era, and let's get straight into it. Season 24 of Doctor Who came after another tumultuous time. After Colin Baker's firing, the BBC ordered a brand new Doctor, and also wanted to really brighten up the tone quite aggressively for the new season. So, things weren't exactly off to the best start in my opinion. Sylvester McCoy was cast as the Doctor, which I honestly think was a bad decision to begin with, but as he goes on, as you'll see, I honestly think he really comes into his own. But for this season, it's not very well regarded in the Doctor Who community, and you're about to see why. Time and the Rani, it has a plot where the Rani, who is a Time Lord, has to capture a bunch of intelligent people, including the Doctor, to learn how to travel in time. No, that's not a joke, that's the plot. She, as a Time Lord, has to kidnap people to travel in time and to work it out for her. And she's gone from this highly intelligent botanist character into an absolute idiot within the space of one story. Mel is screaming throughout the entirety of the bloody 90 minutes. 7 is just so off. It's too goofy, it's too campy, it's too cheesy. There is nothing to his character except goofiness and cheese. And everything looks so bad. The monsters in this are the only thing that's marginally acceptable. Yeah, this is awful. It's a 2 out of 10. Paradise Towers is honestly the only saving grace of this season to me. It's still very goofy, very cheesy and overly pantomime, just like the rest of the stories of this season, but it has enough balance with darker elements, and I think the comedy actually works with this one, because it feels a lot more like Sylvester McCoy and Bonnie Langford as Mal really understand what they want to do with it, compared to the other stories where it seems like they're both just as confused as the audience is towards the script. This one, they really know how to come into their own. I also really love the red and blue factions. I just think they're really funny. All the stuff with the cowardly guy is just really sweet. I kind of love him and wish he became a companion. But yeah, Paradise Towers is much better, but it still has many issues, especially when it comes to tone. It's just too cheesy at times, and a lot of the set design looks really damn cheap. It looks like they just shot in random alleyways, and it's not the best. But still, overall, I'd say this is actually good. 7 out of 10. Delta and the Bannermen is another disappointment for me for this season. I don't mind the plot overall, but I have an issue with how weird characters behave. One of the characters falls in love with an alien lady, you know, fair enough, it happens, but then when she gives birth to her disgusting green monstrosity creature, he falls even more in love with her and wants to become one of her species because, sure, why not? There's a character who would be a very good companion for the Doctor, who he just constantly leads on as a possible companion and then sidelines 24/7. And there's an entire bloody plot where a group of passengers from space land on Earth, and that's the entire start of the plot. And they're all massacred by the villains, and the Doctor essentially goes womp womp, and then the plot continues like these characters didn't exist for the first 2 episodes. Everyone's just out of character and dodgy. I love the 1950s look towards the story though, and there are some funny moments, so 4 out of 10. Dragonfire's another disappointing but not actually bad story from this season. I like it a lot more than anything from Delta and the Bannermen and Time and the Rani did, but it's still not perfect. The Ice World's a really interesting look. I love Kane as a villain. I think he's the first time that the show is trying to get scary within this 7th Doctor's era, and there is definitely a bit more violence in this story, but more cheesy violence. It's also nice to see Glitz come back from seasons 23, and yeah, this is where Mel leaves, and I've probably mentioned her about 3 times so far in this video. She's really not a good companion in the classic era. She's very much there to fill in the gap between Perry and this episode's new companion, Ace, who will go on to be a much more beloved companion. And yeah, that's Dragonfire. It is decent. I like the design of the monster. Kane's great and stuff, but it's just generic. It's a very generic plot. 6 out of 10. And yeah, since this continues the only 4 stories thing from the previous season, that's it for season 24. Massively disappointing, as you can see from my ratings. Yeah, I don't like this season, especially Time and the Rani. When I was originally watching this, I was in absolute shock as to what I was watching. Every single thing I thought couldn't get worse just continuously did throughout the entirety of the story. The only reason this is not a 1 out of 10 instead of a 2 is literally because I only believe there should be 1 out of 10 throughout this video. And since I've already given it to the Dominators, you, Time and the Rani, can avoid it as much as possible. So when it comes to my actual rankings of the season, I think it's pretty damn obvious. The only story I really liked was Paradise Towers. I didn't mind Dragonfire, I thought it was decent, and Delta and the Bannerman was interesting with its gross green baby, but yeah, this season and the start to the 7th Doctor, really bad. I was honestly expecting to hate the 7th Doctor after watching this season. Thank God season 25 and season 26 exists, and let's get straight into them. Season 25's a sort of anniversary season. It's the 25th anniversary and focuses a lot on that element. There's a lot of stuff to reflect the history of Doctor Who. There's Cybermen, there's Daleks, both at the final time in the classic era. And there's definitely a lot of celebratory stuff in it, which is really nice and neat. This is also the first full season with Sophie Aldred as Ace and Sylvester McCoy as Seven, and it's also the start of what is nicknamed the Cardinal Master Plan, which is where the script editor for seasons 24 to 26, Andrew Cartmel, wants to do something new and bring back the Who of Doctor Who. And honestly, this season's definitely an improvement, and quite a significant one, over the past few years. I'd say it's probably the best season after season 21 for the past bunch of years, ignoring the interesting part of the twin dilemma, but I'll get to that. Remembrance of the Daleks is a story I'd always heard about, but was never overly interested in watching. And I really regret taking so long to watch this story. It's a 4-parter, and it is just so perfectly paced. There's still some comedic elements left over from season 24, but not pantomime levels of comedy. A lot of it's more dark, serious, kind of dark humour in all honesty, and it's the kind of stuff I enjoy. There's a few fourth wall breaks, there's a bunch of wink at the camera little moments. Sylvester McCoy really starts to come into the 7th Doctor throughout this, and Sophie Aldred's Ace really is immediately captivating as a companion. I wouldn't say her acting is actually that great, but as a character you can just feel the constant energy that she has. I love all the parallels in this story between Nazis and Daleks. The overall setting back in the original Doctor Who story is really cool. Yeah, Remembrance of the Daleks is a solid 10 out of 10, no questions. The Happiness Patrol is a story that I would love to enjoy more than I actually do. When it comes to the commentary around Margaret Thatcher and the bloody Candyman, aka Betty Bloody Bassett, I really enjoy all that stuff. I think it's really well done. The Candyman is such a silly but entertaining villain, really bridging the gap between the goofiness of season 24 and the much darker tones of season 26. The main problem I have with this story is honestly its length. I don't think this should have been a 3-parter. It feels very much in the final episode like they're just rushing to a conclusion. They don't want to leave anything open, so every plot thread is aggressively finished in the 3rd part. It should have been a 4-parter, and I don't blame the production team for this, because their episode count was reduced so much, but it does put a little bit of a downer on the episode overall. Still, I think it's a good one, a solid 7 out of 10. Silver Nemesis is basically just Remembrance of the Daleks again, but it's now got Cybermen instead. And that's not even a joke. There's even Nazis in this one, just like there was in Remembrance of the Daleks. There's a MacGuffin that could destroy the entire universe, just like there is in Remembrance of the Daleks. And yeah, it's essentially Remembrance of the Daleks, but set in the 80s instead of the 60s, and with Cybermen instead of Daleks. And I think it's fun. It's not a great story, as it is just repeating from previous stuff. It does have some interesting elements when it comes to historical characters randomly appearing in this for no real reason except to tease the Cardinal Master Plan that never came to fruition. And overall, it's fun, but a complete retread of a story that literally I would have finished 4 weeks prior to this one. 6 out of 10. Last but not least is The Greatest Show in the Galaxy, which is weird. I can't really describe The Greatest Show in the Galaxy, apart from to look at it almost like an apprentice, but done by the Doctor Who team, mixed with some kind of like escape room thing. It's very bizarre. It's like a game show, but without the proper game showy stuff. Essentially, this is where Sylvester McCoy, in my opinion, clocks on to who his Doctor is. He definitely improved massively from this season compared to the previous one, but in this story I felt what his Doctor was. A scheming, manipulative, but very fun Doctor, and I think it really does help elevate this story. I wouldn't say this story is as good as a lot of people do. I think it's definitely got some problems with its pacing especially, and this should have been a 3-parter instead, but even so, I'd say it's still good. It's a solid 7 out of 10. And that's season 25, a massive improvement over season 24, and like I said, probably the best since season 21 if we're just counting the Peter Davidson stuff. It's a real good throwback to the quality that we used to have during the early Tom Baker era, and it's something that we've not seen consistency for in such a long time. It was nice to see an actual 10 out of 10 story, in my opinion, finally pop up after so long, and Sylvester McCoy really has started to come into his own as a Doctor, something that he would only perfect, and that is not an over-exaggeration of the next season. Looking at my actual ratings for each episode, you can see where the clear winner will be. And even though the other 3 aren't rated that highly, I'd still say that the quality of them is a lot better than the previous one. At least with this season it's consistent most of the time, that there's at least nothing bad in it. And yeah, when changing over to my rankings, it's pretty obvious where they'd all be. Something which next season only gets improved upon even further, so let's get straight into the final season of classic Doctor Who. Season 26 is the final season of Classic Doctor Who. It will not be what I count as the final season of my video, but more to come with that later. And since this is the final season, I swear the production team knew they were about to all get fired, because tonally, this season is a massive return to the dark horror depression that was the early Tom Baker era and bits of the Pertwee one. This season is mature. It's as simple as that. This season does not pull any punches back. It is a dark, depressing season in all the perfect ways. Sylvester McCoy and Sophie Aldred by this point had perfected both their roles as the companion and the Doctor, and Aldred's acting by this point is honestly incredible, especially in Fenric, which we will get to very shortly. All of this culminates in one of the best seasons of the entire show, and even though no one watched it, essentially, I'm really glad this is the season the classic era went out on, because it showed that even in its final year, Doctor Who could still be amazing. So let's get straight into it. Battlefield feels like a real closure story to UNIT in general for the classic era. It even brings back the Brigadier, which is highly appreciated, and adds a bunch of new UNIT characters which would go on to be quite popular in the audio space. The monster as well is basically a demon, which is another nice little throwback to the unit stuff. And also there's like a witch, lady, medieval knight woman, and there's nuclear weapons, and it's all ridiculously over the top and silly, but in the complete best way that only Doctor Who can be. My honest only issue with the story is a really dumb character moves done by Ace and her friend, which really do take me out of it. They're literally told, just stay in the Soul, and then they do everything to not stay in the Soul. It's very annoying, and yeah. I still really enjoy the story though. I still think it's really good. 8 out of 10. Ghostlight is one of the most confusing and strange stories that I've ever watched, but it feels so high concept sci-fi horror in every good aspect. Now, disclaimer, I'm a big fan of stuff like high concept sci-fi horror, stuff like Annihilation, that is completely my style of sci-fi horror. I love it. I love not understanding it until I properly start to delve deep into it on multiple rewatches, and Ghostlight is perfectly up my street for that. Also, the acting, set design, the location work, oh, it is so beautifully done. Ghostlight is so strange in every single aspect that makes high concept sci-fi horror one of my favourite genres. Everything about this is near perfect, solid 8 out of 10. I just wish it had one more episode to fully delve into its ideas. But speaking of perfect sci-fi horror projects, Curse of Fenric. It is one of the greatest Doctor Who stories of all time in my opinion. I am so mad at myself for sleeping on this story for so many years. It is definitely now in my top 5 Doctor Who classic era stories, and easily in my top 10, if not top 5 for the modern era as well. It is just that good. If this movie just had a bit more blood, maybe like one bit of harsh language, this is an 18 rated thing. The fact that my collection box set rated it a PG is unknown to me. This is a horror film. It just happens to have the Doctor and companion. This feels like the perfect culmination of everything that the Hinchcliffe era worked towards. And yeah, tonally, everything. Fenric as a villain, all the stuff with Ace's family, yeah. This is a 10 out of 10, no questions. And that leaves us with Survival, what is technically the final classic Who story, but also kind of not. I honestly think this story is disappointing. Even if you don't look at it as a finale, and kind of ignore that beautiful speech at the end, this story is quite generic. It does finish off what some fans have nicknamed the Ace's Family trilogy, and I think it does that okay, but as a story in itself, the Master feels very unnecessary and kind of forced in at the last second to this plot. The Doctor just doesn't feel as good as he did throughout the rest of this season because Sylvester McCoy this season is on top form. Sophie Aldred is very good in this, but I don't think there's enough material for him to work with, and a lot of the cheetah costumes, despite looking amazing, can be acted really badly. There's a lot of moments that I think were meant to be scary that I chuckled at, and yeah, the only reason this isn't a 5 out of 10 is that beautiful ending speech, which perfectly wraps up the classic era. So, 6 out of 10. And that is season 26. As you can see from my ratings, this is one of the best seasons in a long time. The only issue I have is honestly with Survival. I know a lot of people like Survival and that's completely fine. I have a lot of issues with it, especially when it comes to the performances of certain supporting cast members, but yeah, this season is solid. I'm going to change it over to my rankings. Fenric is obviously at number 1. It is one of the best stories of not just the 1980s, in Doctor Who's history. It's so dark, so disturbing, so philosophical, the amount of implications that the story has as well with the character of Fenric, and this season overall, I'm glad it was this season that ended Doctor Who. I think it went off showing everyone that even in its final days, Doctor Who could still have some incredible storytelling, incredible character work for both the Doctor and the Companion, and some really good casting. It's a shame it's Survival as the final one and not something like Fenric, but do you know what? Beggars can't be choosers, and this season overall really shows why the show should have kept going. Even so, that is the end of the classic era, and honestly, overall quite a banger season to go out on. But what am I going to do next week? Do I just go straight onto the Ninth Doctor and re-edit those old clips? Or do I do something a bit different before I do that? Who knows? Who knows? I mean, there's just so many weird little Wilderness Years films to watch. Who knows? Maybe I've already watched them all. And right now, I'm currently in the process of recording and editing that video, which is taking me so long. And my god, so much of a Wilderness Years is bad, but you'll see next week. Until then though, toodles.